For a time, the Inferno match looked like one of the most visually unforgettable spectacles in world wrestling entertainment. It was not just a specialty stipulation, it was an image, a wrestling ring surrounded by flames, two competitors trapped inside, and one horrifying objective: set your opponent on fire. Few match types were more theatrical, few were more dangerous, and few felt so perfectly tied to a particular character and a particular era. But after a small number of appearances, the Inferno match largely vanished from the company's programming. Its disappearance was not random. It reflected the limits of the match itself, the risks built into it, and the way world wrestling entertainment changed over time. What made the Inferno match so compelling was that it felt almost unreal. The concept was simple, but the presentation did all the work. The ring was literally engulfed in fire around its perimeter, turning an ordinary bout into something that looked more like a punishment ritual than a wrestling contest. The company's own retrospective described it as perhaps the most dangerous contest in its history, and that is not just promotional language. The match was designed to feel extreme, even by professional wrestling standards. It was built around fear, anticipation, and the audience's constant awareness that one mistake could lead to serious injury or death. That is the key to understanding the rise of the Inferno match. It was never meant to be an everyday gimmick. It was a high-concept attraction, and it was especially suited to Kane, whose character was deeply associated with fire, destruction, and a near-mythic sense of menace. The first official Inferno match took place in 1998 in the feud between Kane and The Undertaker, and from there, the stipulation became one of the company's most character-specific creations. According to the company's own historical material, there have only been 4 Inferno matches in its history, and Kane competed in all of them. That alone tells you something important. This was never a broadly adaptable match type. It was a special effect spectacle attached to a narrow creative lane. And for a while, that narrow lane worked. The Inferno match thrived because it delivered something professional. Wrestling is always chasing, a visual people cannot forget. Even fans who never saw one live can picture it instantly. That kind of imagery has tremendous value. It makes a feud feel larger than life. It creates highlight reel moments. It turns a performer like Kane into something more than a wrestler. He becomes a walking disaster scene, a figure so dangerous that even the ring itself has to be transformed to contain him. In that sense, the match succeeded brilliantly. It gave the company a signature attraction that felt tailor-made for one of its most distinctive stars. But the very thing that made the Inferno match special also limited its future. A stipulation built around open flames is difficult to use often, difficult to build around different characters, and difficult to escalate without becoming repetitive. Once you have seen a ring surrounded by fire, the shock value is already established. The second challenge is even bigger. The match carries obvious safety concerns. The company's own material repeatedly emphasizes the danger of the stipulation, and that danger is not just part of the marketing. It is the central reason the match can never become routine. This is not the kind of concept a promotion can easily plug into any feud on short notice. It requires very specific planning, very specific production, and a willingness to accept a level of risk that most other match types do not carry. That helps explain why the Inferno match remained so rare even during the years when the company was more willing to embrace extreme spectacle. By the company's own count, there were only 4 of them, with the most recent Inferno match taking place in 2006 when Kane faced Montel Vontavious Porter at Armageddon. After that, the stipulation effectively disappeared. The company did later present a closely related Ring of Fire match in 2013, again involving Kane, but even that variation underscored the larger point. Rather than reviving the Inferno match itself as a recurring staple, the company moved toward a safer adaptation that used the flames as a barrier rather than the win condition. That change is revealing. It suggests that the visual appeal still had value, but the original format had become harder to justify. There was also a broader change in company direction. In 2008, World Wrestling Entertainment publicly announced that its programming had moved to a PG television rating and described its content as family programming meant to engage viewers across generations. That shift does not automatically explain every creative decision, but it clearly matters when discussing a stipulation whose entire identity revolves around setting an opponent on fire. A company that is consciously presenting itself as more family-oriented is naturally going to have less appetite for a match type built around one of the most extreme visual concepts it has ever produced. The Inferno match may have already been rare, but the PG-era presentation made it feel even more out of step with the company's public image. And that is what makes the disappearance of the Inferno match so interesting. It was not simply dropped because fans forgot about it. It was a concept with real value, real memorability, and a powerful visual identity. But it was also incredibly hard to sustain. It depended on the right character, the right story, the right production environment, and a company willing to lean into a level of danger that became increasingly difficult to reconcile with modern presentation. The more World Wrestling Entertainment evolved, the more the Inferno match started to look like a relic of a different creative philosophy. That does not diminish what the match accomplished. In fact, its scarcity may be part of why it remains so memorable. Because the company never overused it, the Inferno match retained an aura that many gimmick matches lose over time. It still feels like an event from a world where wrestling was willing to be louder, stranger, and more openly dangerous in its presentation. It also remains one of the clearest examples of a stipulation that was almost inseparable from one performer. Without Kane, the match loses much of its identity, and when a match is that dependent on a single character, its lifespan is always going to be limited. So why did the Inferno match disappear? The most responsible answer is this. It faded away because it was too dangerous, too specialized, and too difficult to fit into the company's later direction. The company never treated it as a standard match type. It was always an attraction built for rare moments. Once the business shifted toward a more controlled, family-oriented image, and once the novelty and character-specific appeal had run their course, there was simply less room for it. The flames were unforgettable, the spectacle was undeniable, but the match was never built to last forever. And in the end, that is the real story of the Inferno match. It disappeared for the same reason it once worked so well. It was too extreme to become ordinary. It belonged to a version of World Wrestling Entertainment that embraced shocking visuals, character-driven spectacle, and a little bit of chaos around the edges. Once the company changed, the match no longer fit as naturally as it once had. What remains is not just a discontinued stipulation, but a symbol of an era when the company was willing to set the ring on fire and call it entertainment.